Hey guys, I'm Si and welcome to Ace Podcast Nation, the home of our cricket series, The State of Play. This is episode number 8. The show's available in video format at youtube.com/Ace Podcast Nation, plus the audio version at all of the usual podcast and radio platforms. Ace Podcast Nation, also your home for many other great shows and series featuring expert guests, top analysts and more on a variety of subjects from MMA, football, cricket, mental health and more. Give us a follow on social media and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can also follow the cricket show if you want to streamline your experience. It is at stateofplay_, which is our new address for the show. So joining me today is not the usual trio. No Kieran Powell today. So it's first of all, Ex Glamorgan bowler, Mr. Nye Norman. How goes it, my friend?
Yeah, not too bad. Thanks yourself.
All good, buddy. 2 shows in a week. It's unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Stuff.
I know.
Busy. But joining us, yet another top guest from the cricket world, another former England player. He's a former Glamorgan legend and England batsman as well as England coach, Mr. Matthew Maynard. How are you, sir?
I'm good, thanks, Si. Yeah, getting Cardiff in lockdown, but not quite as bad as the first time. So at least we can get out plenty in the county, you know. So yeah, pretty good. Hope yourself as well.
Yes, it's not too bad. It's not as, like you say, it's not as bad as the first time round where it was a bit more intense, the lockdown. But it's all right. It's not too bad. Okay, so we're going to talk a bit of cricket, bit about your career and whatnot, and see where the conversation takes us. But what we like to do first is the Magnificent 7, where we ask you 7 quick-fire questions, and you just give us your the first answer which comes to mind. Magnificent 7 for Matthew Maynard. Ben Stokes, Andrew Flintoff, or Ian Botham?
Ian Botham.
Toughest opponent?
Shane Warne.
Mark Wallace or Colin Matson?
Mark Wallace.
Greatest fast bowler of all time?
Malcolm Marshall.
Favourite ground to play at?
Lords.
Best roommate?
Jeff Holmes.
And finally, laziest trainer?
Careful.
There's been a few over the years. That's a great question, actually, because you can pitch up a training and do all the right things, but actually not pick anything up. So you're lazy head, kind of, from learning. But actually, someone who probably did very little around training. I'd have to say a left-arm spinner called Mark Price back in the day. Price, who was a Lancastrian lad, funny lad. So he used to tell us, because he played, a lot at that time. When it came to practice, we didn't practice a huge amount. So I'd put Price in there maybe.
Fair enough. Not that's good. You answered those really quickly, which is always good for the quick-fire questions. I like that. There was no hesitation. You were straight in there. Mark Wallace over Colin Matson.
Yeah, more than the character, really, Si.
Yeah,
Matson was a great glove man,
Yeah.
But I think it was quite obvious when I took over the captaincy that I didn't really rate him as what he brought to the team.
Okay.
Adrian Shaw played ahead of him in '97. So it was down to character, what he gave to the team, or lack of in Matson's case.
Yes.
And Wally, played 220 games consecutively first class, which is an amazing feat. And a number of those games you would have played either with a dislocation or a break, a real tough character.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Mark Wallace, because in my teenage years I was keeping myself, and I think he was a year or two above me he was always playing for Wales and whatnot. He was a top player. Do you think he ever came close to getting picked for England? I always thought he kind of been that far off because he got runs and he was a good keeper.
Yeah, I think he probably was because the runs he got weren't enough.
Mm.
Gilchrist changed the whole way that teams and sides looked at that wicketkeeper batsman. Back there was always a Taylor or not, wasn't there? With England, but not obviously could bat a lot, better than Bob Taylor, and it's always had these kind of right. Who's the best clubman? Because that means, and it's kind of since Gilchrist has just blown everything kind of out the water because he raised the bar so much more. So we see now, obviously in the England setup, you could pick from any one of 4 or 5 keepers who are also tremendous batsmen, and within that there's obviously Billings at Kent, who doesn't really get a look in with the gloves at all. Obviously Joss Buttler, Johnny Bairstow. There's a young lad Tom Banton coming through who's obviously at Somerset, who a fine keeper as well as being a fine batsman, and of course Ben Folkes as well, who's a wonderful player. So we're actually inundated with these guys who are averaging, potentially or could average, 40 plus in the Test match or white ball arena, and I think that's our own Chris Cook here at Glamorgan. He takes kind of batting to a different level in terms of especially white ball stuff. He's won some incredible games for the club over the years, and his keeping is very smart as well. So I think that Gilchrist really did change the outlook of a lot of people to that keeper batsman role.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you look at Ben Folkes, I would argue that he's probably the best keeper England have got. But Joss Buttler, for his batting, he can also keep very well. I think he kind of gets the nods, and understandably so, because, like I say it all the time, but I think Joss Butler's the closest thing that England have got to a Gilchrist who can change a game in an hour. In a Test match, if he stays in for an hour, he can take the game away from the opponents, and there's not that many batsmen who can do that. Nye, would you say, mate? That's what gives Joss the edge, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Matt had a good point there about Sam Billings. Obviously, he scored 180 in the one-day series this summer, and he doesn't get a one-day contract.
Yeah.
As a coach, and Matt will be able to help on this one, if you have 2 players in a team, so say like Somerset back 2007-8, when they had Kieswetter and Butler, both in the England team, both keepers, how did you give one game, another game? Because at that stage, it was England's view was Kieswetter's just the batter, not the keeper. We want Joss to be, but then Somerset's was no, we want Joss to be the keeper, or whichever way around it was. I mean, how would you go about that?
I'd certainly have done my utmost to get a compromise between the two, because obviously what happened at Somerset was they can't look into the future, but Kieswetter obviously sustained that nasty eye injury and retired afterwards. But Joss is a local lad with a huge amount of talent, and even he said, right, you keep in the 4-day games, you keep in the 1-days, and alternate in T20 cricket. Yeah, I'm sure they did try and get a compromise, but I certainly know that Joss would have sacrificed some games to keep to allow him to stay at Somerset at that stage. As I say, it's his home club, and you always want to play for your home club and do well. So. I think they should have got to a compromise. They didn't, and Joss left. But it's a great question, because only those in that conversation at the time would know what went on. And it was my predecessor at Somerset, Dave Nosworthy, who was coach at the time, where they couldn't resolve that issue, and it saw Joss leave.
Yeah. And who for you is the best keeper in England at the moment, do you reckon? Purely keeper. Again,
Folkes is touted as being the best, and we mustn't forget he got 100 out in Sri Lanka. The lad can bat as well, and He's done well for Surrey this year in the T20, so he's a free-format player as well. It's not just a one-dimensional. He comes in middle order, and he's steered them home a number of times this year. He doesn't have that incredible brilliance of Butler. Very few do. But he is a dangerous player. And, you know, I haven't seen a huge amount of folks keep wicket live. I have seen, you know, brilliant catches of his through social media, etc. But you listen to all the commentators who would see him, all the pundits, you know, and they ask them the same question, and they say Foch is the best keeper. But, you know, I talked about Matson there. I don't know what Foch is like as a character, what he's like within that England dressing room. Is he supportive of the rest of the teammates? Is he quite individual? And look, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you've got a side that needs more team-orientated people to get that critical mass and the team moving in a certain way, then you have to leave those individuals behind. And I'm not saying Ben Foch is an individual at all. I'm just potentially looking at reasons why he may not be in there. He's always come across as a very, very likeable individual, feet on the ground, good professional, gets the job done brilliantly. So, you know, he's never been quoted in the media saying this, that, and the other. Why am I not playing? You know, so he's obviously got some, you know, very good traits as far as that's concerned. But we'll just have to wait and see what happens, don't we? You know, with that. But Foch has got to be certainly up there. Steve Davis is another one, I think.
Yeah,
Steve Davis is a wonderful couple.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, Banton as well is obviously he's doing very well in the one-day game as a batsman as well. But you know, he's a good keeper. So it'll be interesting which direction England do go over the next couple of years, because they've got 4 or 5 excellent keepers who can all bat very, very well. It's a good problem to have. So Matt, when we were speaking to Phil de Freitas the other day, Colin Matson came up. Because obviously, as a keeper myself, when I was younger, as I mentioned, Colin Matson being from Cardiff myself as well, Glamorgan fan, he was kind of my hero when I was younger, and I always felt like he was on the brink of the England team, but never quite got there because of his batting. And then obviously you mentioned whereby you selected Shaw over him. I was just wondering if you'd mind kind of expanding on that and maybe just giving us a bit of an insight into why you think maybe Colin Matson never made that sort of jump up.
Look, a great gloveman, as I touched on there earlier, but you know, a very individual, very kind of selfish player. And we were trying to move the side in a direction. So in '96, we had the basis of the side. Obviously, at the end of that season, we released an all-rounder, Otis Gibson, and signed a frontline bowler in Waqar Younis. So we had to fill a gap of an all-rounder, and Adrian Shaw scored a lot more runs than Colin. But Adrian's character was for the team, everything for the team, would play for the team, great trainer. Matson quite often, he was a very selfish individual, which was a trait that you could manage within the team because we had some strong characters in there. But ultimately, it wasn't the way that we wanted to drive the team forward. And so look, the way people are within a dressing room is hugely important to me, because ultimately you want, especially as a coach, you want to see dressing rooms almost self-police.
Yeah.
Look after themselves from a discipline point of view. Any players messing up, players come in, you know, and will knock that player down. It's not all left to the coach. And Chauncey would definitely do that, whereas Colin wouldn't. Colin would bitch more, but actually wouldn't say anything. So it was, you know, a lot of it was down to that character and that person.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting insight. You mentioned another player which I'd like to touch on very quickly, because he was another one of my kind of Glamorgan-based cricketing idols, and that was Otis Gibson. What sort of impact did he have when he came over and signed for the county? Because as a fan and a kid watching, I thought he was, you know, he's just incredible character.
Yeah, he was, and he was still fairly young when he played for us. So I think he learned more about his game after his spell at Glamorgan. He obviously went on and did really well at Leicester, and then finished his career incredibly at Durham. And he was a great all rounder for us. But he wasn't that FIFA winning guy at that stage of his career. He became that. He became that kind of man. But I just felt at the time, as did, speaking to some of the players, that if we could secure someone like Waqar, he would make the difference.
Waqar, is world class, though, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, and that's why it came to be that as soon as we'd signed, or we were close to signing Waqar, it was we sat down with Otis and explained the situation. Obviously, one overseas player only at that stage, but look, he was a terrific. He was a little patchy as an overseas player at that stage of his career. He missed the consistency. He missed that. He would win the odd match for us, but he didn't do it as consistent. Like maybe contribute massively in 7 championship games out of 14. He didn't contribute as often as I thought he should, or what an overseas player should do at that stage. But as I said, he went on to become a terrific overseas player, and his coaching he's done fantastically in that aspect of the game as well. And that's because he's got a great cricket knowledge. He obviously was a dangerous batsman as well. But he's the way he learned to bowl, because he was sharp. There was no doubt about it. It wasn't express pace. He was sharp, mid to late 80s. But he learned to swing it then both ways afterwards. And I think when he was potentially with us, he was going through that, right, can I get up to that 90-plus bowler? And he probably couldn't. He was never going to quite get that extra yard to get up there.
Yeah.
But he developed his skill with the swing and his accuracy, terrifically. So, and a wonderful fella, accepted the situation, saw where we were because we were open and honest with him, and still remain friends.
It's interesting. Like, obviously back then, like you mentioned, you only had the one overseas player, and I feel like there must have been quite a lot of pressure on those overseas players to perform every single game, because they're kind of brought in from the outside, if you like, for lack of a better term, to be that kind of almost star player. And I guess if they don't contribute every game and they don't win you like the majority of games, then they'd be open to criticism, maybe. Do you think that's a fair kind of assumption, Nye, looking back with hindsight?
Well, I think, as Matt said, it depends on the type of overseas player you get. If you get a young lad who's got serious ability and a county that's maybe at a redevelopment stage that will win you half a dozen games, then okay. But as Matt said, they were going for the championship, or they wanted to win the championship. Your overseas pro, like Waqar did, I imagine, would have won 8 to 10, maybe even more games of cricket for Glamorgan on his own. And that was probably the difference, as Matt said, between Otis and Waqar, I'd imagine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, at that point, I'd imagine Waqar, it's just the finished article, and it sounds like at that point in his career, Otis Gibson was kind of the potential and the ability was there, but it was kind of putting it all together. Would you say that's fair, Matt?
Yeah, definitely so. And look, I think Waqar, his contribution, just being on the pitch with us, that kind of what lifted, how he helped Darren Thomas, learn new skills about playing the game, just everything around stuff like that. It was brilliant. In that championship year, we had a great start. We got a great start, but the kind of, after being bowled out for 31 against Middlesex and losing by an innings, we went up to play Liverpool, and at tea on day one, we were 200 for one wicket, 199 for one, and it rained for a couple of days. We agreed a 270 chase in 65, 70 overs, something like that. I can't remember the exact numbers now. Waqar got 7 for 15. No, the ball was, because it had been raining, it was a warm day then, it was just swinging all over the place. He got 7, and won that game. We bowled Lancashire out for 50. Went down Swansea, played Sussex, bowled them out for 60 and 70. Won that game. Played Gloucester, bowled them out for 90 in the first innings. Got some runs. They ended up winning that game. So we won 3 on the bounce. And Wakar won that one, obviously, at Lancashire, but contributed to the others. And, Darren Thomas got a 5 or a 6 against Sussex. Watty was always picking up 3 or 4 wickets. So I think at the end of that year, we had 4 bowlers take 50 wickets. I think the most was 58. I might be wrong. But
it's incredible.
Wakar didn't take, not like Mushtaq when he was at Sussex, take 114 wickets, and him and Rana would take 200 wickets between them in a season and they'd win. This was, Wakar supplemented our attack fantastically, but he also made our other bowlers better around him because of who he was. We played penultimate game of the season, a great game. It was against Essex at Cardiff, and it was kind of getting a bit, the wicket was turning, but it was, they got a bit of a lead. And the best thing that happened, brought Wakar on for a kind of final push to try and keep him under 200, which would have been a really, really tough chase. Really tough chase on that wicket. And Ronnie Irani hit him second ball back over his head for 4 runs. And it was the best thing that ever happened to us that year, because the next ball, Wakar ran in seemingly the same pace, bowled the ball, which would have been about 1.5 yards quicker, 6 miles to 8 miles an hour quicker, not uprooted Irani's middle stump. So it was the best thing that actually happened, because it got Wakar back in that contest, and and we ended up winning that game, thankfully, and before going on to Somerset. But so he had that in him. He had that ability just to kind of go up another level when it was required.
Yeah, he was. I always remember him and Wasim Akram bowling for Pakistan against England. And there was that one summer, it probably was more than one summer, but looking back at it in a kind of child's eyes, there was that one summer where it felt like every time they got the ball reverse swinging, they would kind of just rip through the England batting lineup, the two of them constantly every game. But they were very special bowlers, and I guess as a captain to have, or as a team even, just to have those kind of bowlers and those players available to you, it's going to be, they're the game changers overall. So Matt, just before we kind of go right into your career, and I certainly want to talk about that season some more, where you won the championship for Glamorgan, because it hasn't happened since. So I'd like to discuss that in detail as a Glamorgan fan. But this week, Mark Cosgrove, it was announced, is leaving Leicestershire at the end of his contract. He obviously had a couple of seasons at Glamorgan. And I was wondering if you just tell us a bit about Mark, really, because obviously he's a very experienced campaigner who's coming towards the latter stages of his career. And leaving Leicestershire. I'd like to think he'll go somewhere else, maybe, before he retires.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It depends what drive he's got and, what he wants to do. He was... When I first came back to Glamorgan, so came back as coach for 2008 season, and at the time Cosy, and I wasn't sure, I wasn't, because I obviously saw his shape and stuff, and he wasn't the athlete that you want a bit of drive from your overseas players kind of thing. But wow, when I got to work with the guy and see what he was like around the players, around the dressing room, wow, I couldn't get enough of him, and obviously he couldn't make one of those years. I think he got selected for Australia and played some one days, and Dizzy came in, and they tried everything. Everyone tried everything to try and get him to lose a bit of weight, but ultimately I just loved what he did, with a bat in his hand. And again, he won his matches. He helped our younger players just back their skill, because he did that terrifically, and the best way, from a coach's perspective, it's very tough to influence things on the field of play. And I've always felt that the players will learn more from their peers than they will from a coach, because they're out there at the time. So batting with Ravi Shastri for me was terrific at the start of my career. And batting with Vid Richards at a later stage. Wow, that was just some brilliant learning, you know. And with Hugh, obviously, and Steve James and the Glammy lads were always kind of working to get better and help each other out there. But, you know, Cosy took it to a different level. He was terrific with all those young players he had. He just got them under his wing and just taught them about batsmanship, really, and the game in itself. And, you know, can get too caught up with the game at times and take it too seriously. And he had that lovely attitude about him that what he was in practice, he would practice real hard and with a clear vision of what he was trying to do. And then he'd flip it then and be able to chill and relax outside of that. But around practice, he was full on, brilliant. And, you know, when he went out to the middle, he just played with this apparent air of freedom and belief in his ability. So he was terrific for the team. And obviously the reason why I left was because the chairman, alongside the chief exec and the cricket advisory man, decided that Cosy should go and we'll try and get Alvaro Peterson. Well, that meant we lost our captain in Jamie Dalrymple and our overseas player in Mark Cosgrove in one hit. And it was a crazy, crazy decision in my mind. And I think it proved so. I think Alvaro only lasted a season at the club before he went, but then lost a good captain who was an England player as well in Jamie Dalrymple. You know, the kind of, not the decline, if you like, but it certainly didn't help what the club were trying to do, you know, at that time. And it did put the club back a few years, I'm sure.
So it sounds like, obviously, losing yourself and those two lads, that's a lot of experience and influence on the group as a whole, but also, you know, those young players, like you mentioned, Mark Cosgrove used to help those guys a lot. That's a lot of experience and influence to lose all in one hit.
It was a brilliant mix side, because you had this, you know, Jamie Dalrymple, very kind of army kind of base, disciplinarian, strict, good knowledge of the game, good skills as obviously an all-rounder, played for England, you know, as a really highly skilled player. And then the kind of, you know, phlegmatic Cosy, you know, who just had all these skills, and we just gave him right. So players like Gareth Rees, you know, really prospered. I think during those years that Mark Cosgrove was with him, he averaged over 40 every season as an opening batter. It was a brilliant opening combo for the club, set us up a really good way along the way. And, you know, Gareth was a very kind of determined player, but again, he got a bit more freedom about his game because of the way Cosy was. So they were both huge influences, and to sacrifice that for someone that we didn't know, you know, was a really strange decision. And, you know, hence I left the club. You know, if those three people had come to me and said, look, we want Graham Smith to come and open the batting and lead the team, what are your thoughts? Wow. You know, that's a different ball game then.
Yeah, it's different.
You're talking about a
different,
high class player, great leader, even though it still wouldn't have been an easy decision, because Dalrymple was a very good leader and Cosgrove was a great overseas player. So, but it would have, and if they said, no, this is the way we're going, actually, I would have stayed at the club, but for someone like Alvaro Peterson, who didn't have a great reputation when he was down at Somerset, you know, you do your due diligence on any player that you sign, especially overseas, because you want to make sure that they can fit. So I did, you know, when it was first, I mean, I remember laughing at the three of them when I was told, because it seemed such a joke that they'd sacrifice what these guys had brought to the club for someone that they had obviously not done their due diligence on, not spoken to other counties, not spoken to Titans cricket out in South Africa, and, you know, and done the due diligence on this player who was a talented cricketer, but he could also be a huge handful as well and very difficult to manage, and not a team player.
Now, you played obviously with Mark Cosgrove and Jamie. What were your kind of memories of the both of them, that period, obviously with Mark Cosgrove particularly as well.
Like Matt said, I played a couple of second team games. He came over just before the T20s. I think he'd had a couple of one-day games with Australia. Came back, played second team game down in Somerset, and like Matt said, his chillness in the dressing room. He just spoke to us. He said, "Lads, there's no pressure in this. Go and express yourselves. You're all good cricketers, and just enjoy it." And I remember I was bowling to Peter Trago and Compton at the time, and they hit me for 2 or 3 fours in a row. And he just put his arm around me. He said, "Well, what's the worst that can happen? It's not life or death. Just execute your skills, nail your plans, and it'll come off." So I said, "Okay, fine. I'm looking to bowl Yorkers. Next 3 balls, Yorkers. I think they got 3." And he just said, "There you are. That's what we need to do. If you do your game and control the controllables, whatever happens at the other end is kind of out of your control." And JD, I have to say, like I remember, I came onto the staff. I'd left Millfield. If I'm being brutally honest, I had it quite easy. You know, Millfield was an unbelievable school, but everything was given to you, and I thought, I'll just walk into this. And JD, we did a fielding session, if you remember, Matt, at the barn at the Vale.
Yeah.
And he pulled me to one side, and he just had a chat, and it was, like Matt said, very authoritarian, very like army disciplined, but it was never personal. It wasn't like a dig at you. It was just to get what your talent was, the best out of your body or ability that would benefit Glamorgan. And ever since then, I thought, actually, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to pull me to one side and talk like that. I respected him. And then I remember we had a get-together. We had a social Glamorgan day. I think England played Australia at Swalek. And, we all weren't too many beers and whatnot. But he made sure we were in the next day. We did 1,800 metres running, boxing workout, and I was paired with him. And he just said, "Listen, if you want to go out and get pissed and do that, that's fine. But then come to training the next day and just ask for," what was this expression? Moderation. That was what he enjoyed the most. Moderation. But I like JD. I've got a lot of time for him. I think he's a top guy. And like Matt said, it was a very unusual time. The next pre-season when we had, as Matt said, not only those guys, but we had a new director of cricket in Colin Matson, and Alvaro, who was our captain, but he was all, he tried to maybe go a bit more than captain, I would say. Tried to be more of I don't want to say coach, but like a mentor, which was interesting when he did a classroom day. That was a very interesting day. Something that I wouldn't be too sure that Matt would have seen many days like that in his career. It was interesting.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to get your opinion on, Matt, just very quickly, was we talked about it with Phil de Freitas the other day. We got the bowler's point of view from Nye and Phil, and we had the batsman's point of view from Kieran, and we had the kind of the viewer's point of view from myself. What's your view on the man kid? I don't want to call it a controversy, but it is what it is. And Ashwin, particularly in the IPL this week, basically giving a warning to everyone that he was going to keep doing it. What's your opinion as a batsman on it? And then if your opinion's different as a coach, I suppose, give your opinion on that.
No, he's well within his right. If a bowler oversteps the mark, it's a no ball. If the batsman leaves his ground prior to the delivery, what I think, and they should amend the rule a little bit. So I know the umpires have a lot on their plate, but if a batsman, so I'd change a couple of things in the game on the laws. I'd say if a bowler bowls a no ball, it's 10 runs to the opposition, no extra delivery. Oof. No extra delivery.
No free hit?
No free hit.
Right.
10 runs.
Okay.
Yeah, for overstepping the mark.
Yeah.
It's more like a long jumper. So you're doing a triple jump or a long jump into that pit. Your toe hits that plasticine, which in my mind is the front line. You don't get another go at it, do you?
It's a no jump.
It's a no jump. That's it. Right. 10. You do that 3 times, you're out. You're gone. No jump. Well, just if you bowl 3 no balls, that's 30 runs. Game over.
Yeah.
Whatever format, game over. That'll change the whole game. So bring that in. And from a batsman's point of view, if you're outside of that, then it's one short every time. If you run.
Yeah. I think that's
and you can be run out. And so I have no issues with a mankad the way that Ashwin did it the other day, warned the batsman, who was probably half a mile out.
Yeah, long way.
A point of release.
It's a long way out, wasn't it?
Look, the big thing for me in terms of stuff like that, you should be, as a batsman, first and foremost, watching that ball come out the bowler's hand and being ready to go, ready to sprint. You know, but what we have is a kind of old-fashioned, we've got to walk in with the bowler, and then, you know, and some fielders do it, they walk in with the bowler, but actually they're walking with no purpose. You know, the batter should be there with purpose. Right, when's it releasing it? Right, he's let it out of his hand, now I'm looking to go. And you have all that kind of, you know, now, tough to do in a test match because you'd probably fry your brain out after 3 hours doing that. But in a T20 game or a one-day game, I don't see there any issues. But no, I thought it was what I didn't like was that under-19 World Cup when the young West Indian bowler was a mankad, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I think, had he warned at that stage, I think different situation. If he'd warned that player, and then the next ball he leaves his ground, and he's in every right. And I think everyone around the world would agree. Well, it was a non-striker's fault. He had a warning, but to do it without warning, last ball to win the World Cup was
Yes.
And I know, you know, a lot of the senior West Indies players were very unhappy with that.
So that was going to be my next question, being that if it's a run out, it's within the rules of the game. Why should the bowler, like, just looking at it from a cold, sort of hard, factual kind of point of view, rather than, you know, the spirit of the game and the game that we all love and we've all grown up playing and stuff like that. Like, really, like, why should the bowler warn the batsman? What if he's out of his ground?
No, fair point. No, it's a fair point. I just think, you know, there are certain aspects of the game. Well, look, they've gone, haven't they? A lot of walk. You know, you don't see too many players nicking and walking these days, do you? Know?
No.
They all kind of wait, and while the umpire's there to make a decision. Yeah, you know. So, look, it's because it's such a marginal, because it's just backing up, because it's not actually part of the game at that stage. I suppose that's why it's seen as a little bit slightly different, you know?
Yeah, it's almost like it's still a dead ball, isn't it? The ball's not alive, I suppose.
Yeah, until it you know, and it's not released, you know, and the bowler, at least now, I think they changed the rule, didn't they? That the bowler now has to complete his action, doesn't he, before he can do that? Or, So,
it's
an interesting debate, and look, if a team came to our place and, you know, said to us, look, just warning you first and foremost here that we are not going to warn for any mankads, but we will be looking to do, then you have to warn your players and make sure that, you know, they're the same. I mean, trying to get your own players to do it would be a very different thing, and would I advocate that and try and get the players to do that, then no, because I don't think. But if someone's consistently stealing, then you've got to do something to stop them.
So in your opinion, if someone does what Matt just said there and gives the team a warning at the start of the game, so in the changing rooms just pops a head in and says, look, we're going to be looking to do that throughout this 20 over game, is that a sufficient warning to then do it? Like, if they've given you a heads up before the game, or would you feel that they should still give like a little warning before they do it in the game?
No, I think if a coach or captain's come in and said, listen, lads, this is your warning, then it's okay. As Matt said, he's got to tell the team, right, lads, you need to stay in your ground, watch the ball, sprint as soon as he's released it. That is technically a warning, so
it's sufficient, isn't it?
Yeah,
today, lads.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an interesting one, though, because if say Salts came to you, Matt, and said, right, I want to incorporate this into my game, would you actively discourage him from doing it, or would you say, what's your reasons for wanting to do it, listen to those reasons, and then go, actually, you might have a point?
Yeah, look, if he's a valid point, if he's thought about it, if he's thought about the reasons why, about keeping a, for potentially in T20 cricket or one-day cricket, stop those quick singles or whatever, and to get the non-striker to just think about what he's doing and when he's going, then look, he came up with X, Y, and Z and said, well, yeah, okay, that's fine. Are you going to warn him?
Yeah.
And that then comes down, because I would be uncomfortable if he didn't warn him. I think if he warns and it's someone still stealing, ground, it plays a massive part, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
It plays a big part. If you can steal half a yard, you see it so often with these runouts. How close are they to being out? So,
the technology as well these days is like a couple of millimeters can be the difference in a game, can't it? So it's
so
those couple of yards make a massive difference.
Yeah.
Do we try and use that technology to have foot faults like they would in tennis?
I never thought of the plus 10. It's quite a good way of doing it.
Top no balls, that is for sure.
Would you do it in the longer form as well?
All forms, every single form of game.
What you'd find is, like bowlers these days, they try and get as close to the line as possible, don't they? They want a professional sport. You want every advantage and push everything right to the line without going over the line.
10 runs,
metaphorically speaking. Yeah, when you've got 10 runs, then it'll be a very literal thing. They'll come way back from the line to make sure that it's not even close, I guess.
I don't know one batsman who's ever played the game where if you take a size 12, that's a foot, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Essentially. So from the heel being on the line to the toe being on the line is a foot, which is, let's say, probably a mile an hour over the course of I don't know any batsman who's been deceived by 1 mile per hour in their career. Whether that bowler bowls at 95 or 96 miles an hour, 1 mile an hour doesn't make any difference. If it's 78 to 79 miles an hour, it doesn't make any difference. So why bowlers strain for their heel to touch the line as opposed to the toe touching the line is, quite frankly, and always has been, beyond me. I mean, I was brought up with a fantastic pro, Glamorgan and Steve Watkin, and Steve Barwick. And the pair of them, their toe didn't even touch the front line. They never, ever. And speaking to umpires, because they could just tell where the back foot contact was there, they had more time to focus on what was happening at the other end. And therefore, probably got more wickets, more LBWs, because they had more time to focus on what was going on at the other end, And so, look, why wouldn't you? Why 1 foot? It does not, in my head, being a batsman, and it does not make any difference whatsoever.
No. I remember what he said that. He said there's no excuse for bowling no balls. He just didn't see an excuse for it.
Yeah. You might have an absolute nightmare and lose your run up toe.
Yeah.
And try and but
I think it's like it's like a never-ending topic. We could talk about this all evening, but I would like to move on to you, Matt. But I'm gonna break my own mold, if you like. I normally like to start at the start of your career and kind of work our way through. But the first question I want to ask you regarding your career is, how did it feel to get an MBE?
Amazing, to be honest. It was, the recognition. I mean, it was, potentially for, in a way I wish I hadn't got it, because I got it for charity work and cricket. And I'd already supported the Lord's Taverners and done my bit charity-wise, but obviously it was recognition of what we've done in Tom's name. And
of course.
So, look, it was a bittersweet, but recognition of, that alongside the playing career, which I'm very obviously proud of.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so where do we start? There's so much. I guess the first thing I like to ask our guests is, What's your earliest cricketing memory? What's that kind of one game you played in or you watched or something that just made you kind of fall in love with cricket?
Earliest cricketing memory was playing with my brother when, we'd go down and my old man would be playing and we'd just be playing on the boundary outside of it or playing in the back garden. And, he was a left arm seam bowler and a slogger. And I was just a slogger who kept a wicket every now and then. So, yeah, look, that was probably it. And I remember then we used to obviously have the shared kit bags and stuff like this and never had a bat. And I played over at Bangor Normal College, the ground there. And I got 60 odd this day. And my dad said, look, whenever you get 100, I'll buy you a bat. I'll buy you your first bat. And the very next day, they got 140 in a 20 over game.
Can you remember the bat?
It was up at Uskall David Hughes School on an artificial against, I think it was against Llangefni. No, it would have been Llangefni School. But it was against a school. They weren't very good. And it was a belter of a wicket, as you can imagine, an artificial. And it was like batting on any indoor surface against quite average bowling. So, yeah, I got 100 the next day. So I got my Grey Nickel scoop.
Oh, nice.
Nice. I learned very quickly as a father, as soon as my boys started playing sport, is when you promise something in return for something, whether it's a hat trick or a goal or whatever it may be, runs, they suddenly up their game very quickly.
Incentive, isn't it?
Yes. So where did your kind of break into professional cricket come from? Was it a shock? Was it gradual? How did that come about for Matthew Maynard?
It's probably an elongated story, man. It wasn't a one-off. So I moved over to Bangor Cricket Club because they were getting a professional in called Bill Clutterbuck to do the groundsman and coach and player. So at 14, I left Menai Bridge, who were playing 2 or 3 divisions lower at that stage. But since gone on and done very well in the North Wales Premier League and won it a couple of times. But Bangor was the club to be close to me. So I joined, and at the end of my first season there, second season, there was end of my second season at Bangor, there was a chairman's match. I'd never played in a chairman's match before, but it was basically an all-day affair where you played 2 hours, break for lunch, a couple of hours, all declaration stuff. And I got to lunch, I was 20 or 30 not out, and someone put a beer in front of me and have a beer, So, first ever all-day game, first ever beer during a cricket match, and I smacked a leg spinner called John Bell all over. And John Bell had good connections at Marchwil Cricket Club. And across North Wales, he used to run this cricket festival and knew various coaches. And at the time, there wasn't strong links between North Wales and Glamorgan. So, but he did know Colin Page very well. He was the Kent second 11 coach. So I ended up going down to Kent for a trial. Doing quite well in that Easter trial and went back for my GCSE. Went back that summer and played the full summer there, and then went back for another 2 years. But I never got offered a contract, never. And in that last year I was there, or last half of season I was there, I was batting at 6 and 7 and batting as if I've got no chance here. And in the meantime, Alan Jones had been in contact from Glamorgan. So went over to Glamorgan, and it's funny how things happen. But played against Hampshire, and they had a quick bowler called Steve Malone, who went on to come and play for Glamorgan and become an umpire. And he got me out first innings for naught. Second innings, I snicked off. Going to be a pair, gone naught. Look behind him. First slip had left it, second slip. We left it first slip. And it went for 4, and I went on and got 100. And I guess that just shows the margins, really. small margins.
Fine margins, isn't it?
Because all of a sudden, then you get belief that you can do it. I mean, I'd scored centuries for Kenting, but never in a second 11 competition, just in club and ground matches and club matches down there and stuff. So it's my first second 1100. And then the next year, I was the most consistent player in the. I got offered a contract then at the end of that year.
So how old would you have been then?
So I was 18.
So
I'd been down at Kent for when I was 16, 17 and half the season when I was 18. I played half season then at Glammy, and they offered me a contract. And very sadly then my father passed away in the October. He knew I'd got a contract, which was great, but he never saw me play as and now a professional player. So I just vowed to play the next season for him, and it went well. I was second 11 kind of player of the year and got called up for my debut, and then it went pretty well. So
yeah, so you made your England debut in '88, was it?
88.
Yeah, 88 against the West Indies. Was that kind of expected? Did you kind of know beforehand, or was it a bit of a shock? Was there talk of it?
There was media talk of it, but there had been, for a little while, and there's always media talk. Look, it was a series. A lot went on that series, if you remember. Mike Gatting, captaincy, Cowdery in for a game, and then Gooch leading the side. So the freedom captains, I think 29 players played in that series, all told, and. Yeah, we got an invitation to play for England. An invitation came through the door. Invited to play for England.
I think I'll say yes.
So you meet up then on the Wednesday for a Thursday start. Have a dinner Wednesday evening when the chairman of selectors tells you how good you all are, and go out there and play for the Three Lions tomorrow, and have a wine, have a beer before you go to bed, kind of thing. So quite surreal, but I think people have asked me this throughout my career. Why didn't it happen for me? I was hugely nervous going out and playing for England on debut, but also every single time I played. Like I was nervous when I Glamorgan. Every game I played, I batted. I was nervous, apart from in my last season, but we'll maybe come to that later. But every game I played, I was nervous. There has to be nerves when you go in the bat. But it was, I think, what compounded my failings with England was I never felt valued in that environment. So I always had trying to prove myself in that environment to other players. Whereas at Glamorgan, when I made my debut, Phil North made his debut. Ian Smith was also in the team. Steve Barbigan played a lot of second 11 cricket, so I was familiar with him. I was familiar with Jeff Holmes. I was familiar with a lot of the players. Hugh Morris played, the skipper on Tong. So I was familiar with a lot of those. I know that those players actually thought I could play, which was nice. And obviously I got to a situation where we lost 4 quick wickets, and it was kind of pressure off and just go out and play. And then after that one knock, they knew I could play, and that was it. I was settled and, went on and felt at home straight away in that environment. Whereas with England, that never happened because I never got that good start to my career. So I was always been trying to prove that I could play and trying to prove to the teammates I could play rather than just play the game of cricket.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Matt. I was just going to say, I spoke to Mark Ramprakash recently. I interviewed him for a segment on the show, and one of the things which came up with him was that feeling of kind of nerves and feeling the pressure, because I felt like yourself, Mark Ramprakash, players like this, hugely successful at county level, scored ridiculous amount of runs on a consistent basis for years and years and years, but never quite happened when brought into the England team. And I always felt like a big contributor to this, and obviously you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that it felt like if you didn't score runs, you were out. There was never, for instance, using the current team as an example, they'll bring a young player in or they'll bring a player in, and that player will generally stay for a series or two. regardless of how they do, they will try and give them a series or two to settle and show what they can do. Whereas with yourself and with Mark Ramprakash and a few others, it did feel like it was kind of, right, this is your chance, don't blow it. And if you didn't get runs, you were out for the next test. That's got to be, that's a tremendous amount of pressure for anybody. Would you think that my opinion of that from the outside is fair? Or do you think
Ram played 50-odd test matches. He had a good crack at it. I know he got dropped a few times, from various teams, obviously the one-day teams as well. But you can't compare me with Mark Ramprakash. Ramps was an unbelievable player. He got 118 centuries. A phenomenal player, Ramp. I was basically half as good as him. 50-odd centuries. So look, he was a terrific player, Rams. Now, where we do, I think, agree though that atmosphere that you go into play. So yes, you want to succeed. Every time you go out to bat, you want to succeed. But and succeeding in 3-day cricket or 4-day cricket is, you want to try and score a century. But the best in the world failed 4 times. So Bradman, 1 in 3 knocks, he scored a century, which meant he failed twice before getting that third, if that makes sense. So, what, Steve Smith's 1 in 5, he's one of the best in the world now at Test cricket, fails 4 times before succeeds once. If you average that out, as a batsman, I think average a century every 10th innings. So I failed 9 times for that 10th success. So, there are kind of margins kind of along those lines if you want to look at. But it wasn't about not the runs. It was about trying to please those in the environment. And I think Rams tried to do that as well. And so it takes you away from what your main aim is to do, because you put the extra pressure to show them you belong, to show that you're good enough and whereas if you have that belief and backing in yourself from others, that for me was a big part of it. Big part of it. And as I say, I had that at Glamorgan, I had that at club cricket with Bangor, I had that when I played at St Fagans, but it's something that I miss with England. But look, playing for England and through the 80s and 90s was quite often a 1 in, 1 out, 1 in, 1 out. I think it changed when David Graveney and Duncan Fletcher took over the helm back 99, 2000 series and watching Chris Adams play the 5 Test match series in South Africa that winter. And all of a sudden you think things have changed.
Yeah.
They're actually going to give a guy an opportunity. And, anyone who plays 5 Test matches back to back, and it's a very tough thing to do, don't get me wrong. But well, you'll start to feel at home, you'll start to feel part of it, you'll start to feel back in it, and they give you an opportunity to show what you can do. And I think since then, I know there will always be the odd player who isn't treated like that, but more often than not, the guys get a good run these days.
Yeah, I think, I guess, if you feel part of the group, it's easier to just focus on what got you picked for the squad, whereas if you're trying to, like you say, you're almost trying to make or feel accepted by the rest of whether it's the team or the staff or whoever is involved, you're not concentrating on what got you to the dance, if you like. Later in 1998, you went on a controversial tour to South Africa, the Rebel Tour. Tell us a bit about that and kind of how it came about, why you went, the reaction from some of the other people and the media.
So it was actually it was 89, 90 that winter. So obviously made my debut in 88. Got overlooked for that touring party for the winter to India, which got cancelled anyway. Met up with a selector at Leicester, first game of the season. Look, Matt, you score runs, good chance you'll be playing. The shared Texaco series, which is the one-day series at that stage, will be taking place, and you're in our thoughts. So I got good 60 odd that day, and it was a 60 odd, but it was I was very pleased with it. And got a couple of hundreds in the Benson and Hedges competition, which was our, white ball, or red ball it was in those days, but a 50 over competition, and 191 not out against Gloucester in the championship. So look, I was in unbelievable form, great form. Texaco squad gets announced. I'm not in it. But not only am I not in it, I haven't had a call to say how far away I was, or I missed out on selection to X, so keep scoring runs, and you'll be there. There was no communication whatsoever. So I then got a call from David Graveney saying that Ali Bacher would like to meet you. So he came to our house in Danes Court. My missus made some food. We had young Tommy, young family, and he sat down and talked about the tour and what the hopes were for the tour from a South African perspective, and the money that was on offer for us, making ourselves available. Told that Mike Gatting was already signed up as captain, John Embry was going, Chris Broad, and they wanted myself and Alan Wells as younger players to come on the tour as well. And it all sounded great. And I said, look, can I have some time to think about this? He said, sure, not a problem. So soon I sat down. I said, look, things aren't obviously happening with England as we thought. I have no contact and stuff like this. This gives an opportunity to effectively pay off the mortgage on our house, to not worry about or worry too much about the future as a professional sportsman. As we know, it can be an injury, it can be a dramatic loss of form when you're out of a job. So it ended up from that position being a fairly simple decision to make. In hindsight, my lack of knowledge on what was going on in South Africa and what was happening out in South Africa at that time was pretty poor. And of course, these days you can just look up on Google and and see what's going on and check that information. But it was a lot more difficult to do that in those days without having to go to a library and look at papers from back in the day. So it's not a decision I regret. It's a decision that was right for me at that particular time. And I, even had Viv had been offered to go on various tours with Richard, and he said to me, look, I went and played World Series cricket. I got a ban from playing. You've gone to South Africa, you've got a ban from playing. We're actually in the same boat. We both went for professional reasons. And that because I was very nervous about, meeting the great legend that is Viv Richards, on the back of just coming back from South Africa on that tour.
Of course.
But he was unbelievable. He was absolutely fine about it. We've got a great relationship going, and as a batting pair, but also as friends as well. And he certainly didn't ever seem to appear to hold it against me or the effect. But look, it was a really interesting experience going out there and seeing what was going on. And of course, it was supposed to be over 2 winters, the tours, but the second year got cancelled because of the bombs and because of the disruption. But also, what I believe, and this is not from Ella, this is just my belief, is that had a tip off that if they cancelled that tour, that would look favourably upon them from an ICC perspective. Okay. So whether there's any, that's just my personal opinion. And obviously within 18 months, they were admitted back into Test match cricket.
Yes. So obviously you had a ban. Was it a 3-year test ban that you had?
5-year ban.
5-year ban.
We all got a 5-year ban, which got basically cancelled as soon as South Africa got their readmittance.
Right. Okay. Got you.
So as soon as South Africa, played, I think it was India. There was their first matches were against.
Yeah, I think it was.
In
Yes.
92. Then we were all allowed to play in GAT. Played again for England. John Embry, myself. So a good number of us went on, and played for England again.
So when you went on that tour, when you made that decision, were you well aware that you were going to get some sort of ban
Oh, we knew we were going to get
for
a fine.
going?
We knew we were going to get a substantial ban. Yeah.
What was the kind of reaction from your peers generally for your decision to go? Was there any kind of people who were a bit frosty towards you, or?
No, not from the players' perspective, no. One of the lads who went, I'm just trying to work out which one it was. It may have been Embry. I think it was John Embry. He said that for the money that we're earning, the 5-year ban it doesn't come into play, because had they played for England every single test match, every single tour, every single series, they still wouldn't have come close to meeting that figure after 5 years.
Wow.
It's a no-brainer then.
So it was guaranteed. It was more than guaranteed England income for 5 years without playing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it was at the time. It was, these days it's obviously different ball game playing international cricket. But then it just showed that every game you had to play every game for 5 years. You wouldn't make the money that we were getting for the tour.
Yeah, like Nye said, it's a no-brainer then, isn't it? Fast forward to 2004, when you were appointed assistant coach with England. Mike Afton was quite critical of your appointment because of the Rebel Tour. Like, how did that feel? Because to me, like looking completely from the outside, it kind of feels like 1988 to 2004, and he's still holding on to that a bit. It seems a bit strange to me. Was there anything was there any, I don't know, did you not get on with Mike Afton before that or something? And that was the reason why he did. It doesn't make any sense to me.
There was quite a lot. There was quite a lot about it, wasn't there? Because obviously Gat was a big job within the ECB. He was captain of the tour. David Graveney did a big job within the ECB and still does some work on the academy side of things, I believe. But he's been involved in the ECB basically since he retired from playing. John Embry had still played and stuff like this, and there were other people who were in that mechanism, but decided to choose me. And look, Athers knows what I thought about him after the '94 tour. I think of the Caribbean, which was, he became captain, but the way he kind of didn't look after what I believe very well, the management within the team wasn't in. It was an environment that didn't necessarily look at individuals. It was, if you don't perform, then you're going to be out. So I got my best test score in that first test match of that series. My highest test score. I didn't play again also. And I knew something was wrong when we played before the next test match. There was a game against a Guyana 11. I got 40 odd, 50 odd. Ramp's got 100, and then the net before the day before, basically I wasn't on the list to net. And Fletch said to me, "Oh, Matt, you just go in at the end. Bring all the balls back when you're finished." Everyone bar Robin Smith left and Judge stayed, and guys, well played, Matty, and stuff like that. So I knew that was kind of the end of the tour then, and but it was just the way it was done. It just didn't go very well with me. There was no open conversation. There was nothing from the captain at that stage. So I had a few words with him. Maybe it was in response to that it logged in his mind, and what was it? 10 years later or so, he decided, to bring something up. But it was, I loved that winter as well. And I said earlier that I've been working for Thomas Carroll, insurance brokers in South Wales, in the winters prior to 04, 05. It wasn't, look, I found it very hard working for them because it's not my natural kind of thing I did, and I had to learn about insurance, obviously, and trying to go out there and open doors to let the company in. And then I got an opportunity to coach then, obviously that 04-05 winter to Zimbabwe and South Africa. And I loved it. I loved it. And I got back to pre-season that year and I just felt flat batting for the first time in my career. I thought, hang on, there's something wrong here. I remember Darren Thomas pulled me and he said, well played, Matt. I said, I don't know. Who was it?
Yeah.
And the first game of the season, I didn't have any nerves for the first time in my career. Whoa.
Was that it for you then? Was that sort of a defining moment?
Look, it's funny now. I played that game and then we went up to played against Warwickshire in the 4-day, and then we went up to play a Sunday League game in Manchester, and it was like all this mizzle was around, and we fielded. I was keeping wicket and stuff like this. And felt real bad, like kind of must have picked something up, and I felt bad on the Sunday, and this mizzle didn't help things. Got back to Cardiff, could hardly get out of bed on the Monday. Anyway, Tuesday comes along. I say, look, I'm struggling for practice here, guys. I've just called the doctor out. Doctor calls pneumonia. So I had 6 weeks out with pneumonia. And I was in a right state. But look, it was it wasn't the way I'd like to have finished my career as a Glamorgan player. But, you know, it would have been, you know, nice to finish like what he did. But look, things don't always work out how you'd like them to finish. I had a wonderful start to my career, and my last innings for Glammy ended up being a naught. Second innings at Warwickshire to bat on that Sunday. So you can say, look, it started there and ended there, and then, you know, fair enough. But, you know, no thanks to the supporters, all that kind of stuff, you know, for their support over the years, and no kind of last game in front of the members, which was a little disappointing, but it was just the way it was. So I'd been released at that stage for 6 weeks to do the coaching with a 1-day bit of 05. But I was, during my illness, during the pneumonia, I got offered the full-time job.
So you didn't get to say goodbye to the Glamorgan fans and the club generally as a player. Obviously, you've been back in various forms since. In terms of coaching going forward, would you like to get back involved in the England setup at some point, do you think?
It's a good question. Funny enough, I was talking with a good friend Dean Conway the other day. We're having a hit around the golf course, and said, you know, what are your aspirations there from a coaching perspective? I said, well, look, the biggest job that, you know, I've got is to try and get Glammy back to winning some silverware. You know, that's going to be a tough job in itself, and if I can manage to do that's reward enough for me at this stage of my career. I would never say no to if I got released by Glamorgan and an opportunity came to coach an international side and you get that, then that's a different matter. That's a different, because you've got to look for work. But in an ideal situation, then, you know, we'll try and get Glamorgan back to winning some silverware and seeing players get close, if not play for England, because that's where we need to try and get. We need to try and get our players good enough that they're, you know, almost playing for England or just playing for England. You know, if we get lucky with a player and he comes through the system like an Ollie Pope, who's got all the attributes and stuff, and he goes on and plays and does it and nails it and could be there for a long time, then even better, you know. But we have to aspire to start getting players in the Lions teams, which we haven't had for a good number of years, before representation in the senior squad. But that will all help to make, you know, and give us a good strong squad going forward for a number of years.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, just to finish us off, Matt, then, to be honest with you, look, we could sit here and speak to you for like 3 hours and just it really is fascinating, and there's so much which we could talk about. But I got a couple of kind of general questions that I'd like to ask, and then I would like you to talk us through the 100 which won Glamorgan the 1997 title, to be the last thing we talk about. But I ask every guest this: what's the worst or funniest sledge that you've either given or been on the end of?
One that really got the bait, and it wasn't directly to the batsman, but the one that I delivered to Ronnie Irani. So Ronnie had dropped Peter Sutch for a guy called Tim Phillips, and Georgie was keeping wicket. I was at silly point as Crofty was bowling and stuff like this. And I just said to Shorty, geez, Sutchy would have been a handful on this, wouldn't he? And Ronnie just lost the plot. He shoved his bat in my face and just, you keep your mouth shut, mate. Our selection's got nothing to do with you. And that was it. We just nibbled at him all day then on that, all day. And he just block. Didn't take the game from us at all. And they were in a position where they could have done. And the best one that I had at me, which totally threw me, because Paul Nixon, you just used to talk rubbish all the time. Oh, new shoes there, Matty. I like those, boy. But, you know, they talk about, have you done the laces up right? You know, and have you changed your grip? Have you tried to put your mind, like, get into your head that way? But that didn't worry me. And then Jack Russell would obviously come round with his sunnies on and try and stare you out and be a little rat, you know. And I used to like keeping my area clean. It was my area, so I'd kick. I used to bat in half and half. So with my back heel, I'd kick out the bigger bits of rubbish just to keep my patch, and Jack would put them back in when he flipped them back in. But the best one I had was, I think I got 20 odd in the first innings at Test match in '93 at the Oval. I felt quite good against Warney and stuff like this. And it was all going well. I felt at home, and second innings walking out, and just as I'm walking out, it was on the flight path to Heathrow. So Warney leaves the group of Aussies and comes and says, Maynard, see that plane there? If you don't get any runs this innings, you won't be on the one to the Caribbean in the winter. And I hadn't thought about West Indies tour, about next game for England, anything. And all of a sudden, I started thinking about it. It was brilliant, you know. It was a brilliant chirp for that reason, that it got me thinking about something that I shouldn't be thinking about. That was beyond my control. And I learned a lot from that. So it was a good chirp for that reason. And it did unsettle me. I don't mind being called a shit batter or a spawny git or anything like this when I'm playing, or, you know, rubbish or whatever. But that just kind of threw us because it was just so out there, if you like, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a goodie.
So the question, which I know all our viewers want to know, and I know Kieran wants to know, I want to know, and that is, why didn't you play Nye Norman more when he was at Glamorgan?
You kind of get to a stage where you pick yourself or don't pick yourself, don't you?
Yeah.
Wow.
It's, you know, you kind of, whatever you do, you look at who's performing, don't you? It basically just comes down to that, who's performing. But I guess we didn't overlap quite enough.
Yeah, we had 1-2 seasons, I think.
So as I was getting in, and probably then that was my last season going out.
Okay.
So what was being built with Dalrymple and, you know, and Cosy was soon to kind of dissolve, really. And as you said, you know, you had that the following season with Matson as director of cricket and Alvira then as captain, and quite a change. So you coming into the side, you got closer. You get closer to doing things, and then it's really a case then of who manages that. And that's the other thing, you know, you keep an eye on those young players coming through. And look, we got a good little couple of young players now who could make it. So they're helping with their development and stuff like this. But another coach comes in and they may not see what you see, and they're no longer there, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it can be difficult then, can't it, when you're developing younger talent, if there's a change in coaches or management and they see something different, it could be a whole new career path for
young
people.
players, you've got to reprove yourself.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And then say, all right, I've got to earn, and that kind of goes back to in a way, that situation I had within England where I've got to prove. Well, actually, you don't, because you've proved because you're a county player, and I've proved because I'm now an international player. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
you don't think like that. You don't strip it back when you're in the middle of it. Yeah, it's only afterwards.
Yeah, I think one person, Chris Ashland, he was one of my best mate, probably his best man at his wedding. I think he was one of the first bowlers on the team sheet for you, white ball cricket, when you were coach. He found it incredibly difficult to then re sort of prove himself to Alvaro and Colin after the comments of "you're too small to bowl seam," and he was like, "What? I've gone from one coach who backed me entirely, playing all sort of white ball games, to then that attitude of, well, yeah, you're not going to play." I mean, I don't think people quite realise that if a coach comes in, has that attitude to the other coach, it does play with your mind, definitely.
Look, I don't think any bowler in recent history, and when I say recent, since overarm bowling has been allowed in the game, or underarm was banned in the game, bowls lower from a lower trajectory than Lathy's Malinga.
Yeah, no one.
No.
It's impossible.
And he didn't have a bad career, did he?
Yeah, exactly.
So talk about height as a quick bowler or stuff like that. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Well, one of the hardest things we ever had. You imagine Tevez bowling, say, one end. Sorry, Chris Ashling. Chris Ashling at one end, and if we had a 6'8" bowler at the other.
Yeah, possibly.
It'd be an absolute nightmare to face as a batter.
Yeah.
Because one minute, you've got to go back to a ball that's just fractionally back of a length you're going back to off the 6'8", and you can almost drive that ball because it skids on from someone like Ashling. So it's a totally different game. I remember when we played Notts one year and they had little James Taylor, and he was batting with
Will Jefferson, wasn't it?
Will Jefferson.
Yeah, I remember that.
And at Swansea.
Yeah.
My God, I mean, that must have been bowlers to bowl to, because one of them's cutting you, and the same ball, the next one's driving you.
Yeah, he was a big man, Will Jefferson.
He was a big man.
Right, okay. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but very, very, very quickly, I will say, Nye came up with a tremendous bit of trivia for us the other day with Kieran and Phil Freitas, which was the 100 where you secured the county championship for Glamorgan, was a very unique 100. Do you know why it was unique?
I do, because you actually sent it through.
Oh yeah, I did, didn't I? No. You could have cheated then, but I like the honesty at least. That was good.
Well, that's me. You get that's what you get. Yeah. So the first single was after I got 100, and I inside edged it down a fine leg.
Yeah, that's it.
Crazy. And it was, obviously one of those things that you don't plan on or you don't work for. Just one of those things that happens. Yeah. Mm.
Yes, spot on. Okay, Matt, thank you so much for joining us, mate. I really, really appreciate your time and your honesty. It's been fascinating, and I would love to get you back on again at some point and chat about Glamorgan and whatnot and the ongoing stuff. And I'm sure there'll be more cricket on by then, and hopefully there'll be fans back in stadiums. Hopefully. Anytime, Si and Nye. Anytime, guys.
Cheers, bud. Appreciate that.
Stuff. I'll pop all the social media links for Matt, for Nye, for the show in the bottom. Subscribe to youtube.com/Ace Podcast Nation, and we will see you for the next episode of State of Play with an all new guest talking all things cricket. Cheers.